So it's difficult. It's difficult as we all still, we're used to this medium, but that doesn't mean that we prefer it. So we thank you for your time and being with us in this way. And I want to also thank my co-presenter, Mike Peacosh. Mike is a colleague through the Washington Rotary Club. He's a licensed professional counselor, and he'll speak with you more about that shortly. And I really have great respect for Mike. He's someone who not only, is in the business of teaching people as a professional how to communicate and how to foster healthy relationships, but he really walks that walk in his own life and in his own practice. So we're very fortunate to have him here this evening as well. As Kathy mentioned, I'm a partner with Peacock Keller. I practice in employment law, also in school district law, and a fair amount of my practice in that area deals with special education law. So as we talk about some mental health issues tied to civility and tied to the way we should all be treating each other tonight, I certainly have an interest in that, and I live a little vicariously through Mike and his career on that front as well. So I think we're all probably familiar with the title of a book that was popular, at least back when I was in high school. I don't know if that makes me sound older or younger than what I want to sound, but it was a book, or at least a small essay, called Everything I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And it became almost trite. And I think we all realize at this point that we think we know all there is to know about civility. The rules are pretty simple, right? We play fair. We should be kind to others. We should treat others the way that we want to be treated. And so the question occurs, why do we need to spend time in yet another seminar, particularly those of us who are lawyers and have taken a lot of continuing legal ed on ethics and civility? What more is there to say on this subject? And I would humbly offer that there's a great deal more that needs to be said. As Kathy mentioned, this seminar kicks off the WCBA's 2021 Law Day series. And the theme of that series this year, in conjunction with the American Bar Association and the Pennsylvania Bar Association, is the rule of law. And our Bar Association and our Law Day Committee believe very strongly that those of us who earn our livings working in some form or another in the justice system, that we have a special and unique responsibility to uphold and defend the rule of law, and also to advocate for changes when changes in our justice system may be needed. And civility, we believe, is absolutely essential. It's the underlying principle to not only defending the rule of law, but working to improve it in society. However, as important as that is within the legal profession, we also believe that all of us as citizens, in whatever our vocation might be, out in the world of work, or even and probably especially within our own houses, at our own dinner tables, we all have an obligation to treat one another with civility. And this ultimately, we believe, is inherently tied to upholding and improving our American rule of law. And so we're going to try to approach this topic from several different directions this evening. And one, we want to talk a bit with you about what our fellow citizens should expect from those of us who work in the legal profession in terms of our duty toward advancing the rule of law and doing that in a civil manner. And then certainly how you need to hold us accountable for doing that, and also to recognize the efforts that we're making within the legal profession to do that. But then also we want to generate thought and hopefully some discussion as much as we can, again, in this medium, about how civility is essential to all of us, maintaining the rule of law and making those positive changes when we need to. Something that I've noticed, and I'm sure I'm not unique in this, in recent years, is that people on all spots along the political spectrum have been voicing some discontent in feeling the rule of law perhaps is being ignored. And that is not an issue unique to, like I said, any side of the political spectrum. That's a view that for various reasons, people of various different political opinions and beliefs seem to have that concern. I think even of greater concern that I hear just being alive in the world, and certainly in my practice, in my daily life, is that there's a sense in our country, in our society, that if we disagree with someone, or if someone disagrees with us, we often feel that we are shut down, we're not heard, we are ignored. People tend to go to their corners and they tend to become entrenched there. And the issues of defending our rule of law, respecting it, and improving it seem to get lost somewhere in that process, of people feeling disrespected, people feeling ignored, not heard, and people retreating to their own beliefs and feeling ignored, or ignoring someone, disenfranchising their opinion is certainly problematic enough. But when it then goes to the next step of disagreeing with people in a manner that is incivil, that is hostile, that is disrespectful, that takes a disagreement about ideas and reaches into actually disrespecting a person as a human being, I really don't know where you go from that in terms of both getting along with others, basic relating to one another, but then also ultimately, working well within the rule of law that we all should have some level of respect for, certainly, and then also making those positive changes when they might be needed. So in discussing civility and the rule of law, I've also enlisted the help of my friend Mike, and he's a licensed professional counselor. And so where does that come into this picture? And he can tell you, certainly in his practice, he deals with his fair share of conflict resolution issues and communication issues. And so he's going to help us to understand not only some of the mechanics and the hows of civil conversation, but also some additional whys. I'm trying to stress that a civil society needs civility at the most basic interpersonal level. But certainly he's also going to explain how that comes down even to the basic, very personal level, how being civil to one another affects and improves our own mental health within our own hearts and minds, and then certainly the health of all of our relationships, friendships, marriages, work relationships, all of those kinds of things. Speaking only from my own profession, mental health is a vital concern among lawyers. We have an entire organization through the Pennsylvania Bar Association called Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers that exists to support us when we struggle with things like anxiety, depression, substance abuse. Just to quote one study, the American Bar Association partnered with the Betty Ford Foundation recently and found that among roughly 13,000 licensed attorneys, 28%, 19%, and 23% of those attorneys, respectively, were found to regularly experience mild or higher levels of anxiety, stress, depression. About 21% of those scored or ranked their behaviors at a level consistent with problematic drinking. And that's to say nothing of the amount of diagnosed substance abuse conditions among our profession. And certainly the incivility that we can face as lawyers can contribute to that. And I have, sometimes there's a silver lining in negative experiences in life. And so I had a very negative incivil experience about 35 minutes ago while I was trying to prepare for this seminar. And I'll just share that as an illustration of some of the stress that I see in my profession. And I don't ever profess to claim that that's unique to lawyers. All of you have your own version of this, but there was a gentleman who had contacted me earlier in the week, and he was interested in having some documents reviewed. And I'd had very polite conversations with him, and I explained everything that would be involved. And I've talked with him for probably over an hour this week, and several more hours involved in getting some preliminary work ready. And none of this, by the way, was for a charge, and that will become relevant in a minute. So I sent him the engagement letter, and ethically, as well as morally, we are required to disclose to potential clients what our work will involve, what we charge for, what our rate is, and what is considered billable time. And he was really quite shocked to understand that he would be billed for, not only my time reviewing the documents, but communicating with him about them, emails sent and received. Do you mean you bill me for every phone call? So I very politely explained to this gentleman that is the model of our profession. We don't make a product that you can hold. And, I reverted to Abraham Lincoln. That's pretty bad when you have to go back to the Lincoln quote, but I do it when I have to. And my first boss used to do that back in the day. Chris Vanderman's out there somewhere. I learned this from him. So I did quote that, Abraham Lincoln said, a lawyer's time and advice are his stock in trade. And, we feel that that's fair to be compensated for the work that we do. So the gentleman insisted that, he wasn't interested in paying a good deal for this. And I advised him that, it just didn't look like we were seeing eye to eye, and we probably wouldn't be able to enter a representation. I had been polite throughout, and he hung up the phone on me. And that was pretty unpleasant. I can't think of the last time I've been hung up on in my personal or professional life. I'll get over it. It's business. It's fine. And thankfully, I have more days that are not like that in my job than days that are. But you can see, and you have 1,000 examples in your own life, how these things begin to add up, and they can reach a point where incivility actually affects our mental health. As lawyers, we're bound by some rules of professional conduct, and the public needs to know and understand, as we educate you through Law Day, a bit about the legal system, that we are held accountable, really basic rules of professional conduct. A lawyer shall provide competent representation to a client. Competent representation requires the legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation reasonably necessary for the representation. And part of being competent, I would argue, is being mentally healthy, mentally well, mentally fit, to be able to do that work for our clients. And we even have rules of civility that explain that we have an obligation to advance the rule of law and the well-being. And it talks about, our rules talk about advancing the well-being, not just, the work duties that we have to do, but actually the well-being of those with whom we engage in court and even in our own offices. So we have an obligation to be civil. It serves a variety of purposes, from serving the legal system to our own mental health. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mike for some thoughts and some insights on why this is important, and then we'll certainly get into more of the hows.
Okay, and sorry that happened to you. I know you'll be okay, but yeah, at least it was a timely, right? It's providential, right? Well, and again, thanks, Rachel, for the kind introduction there at the start of your comments. I'm honored to be a part of today's discussion. And I have to say, I'm especially humbled to have been invited to present with Rachel, for whom I have the highest regard. This is my opinion. Rachel Lazowski is the very picture of civility and class as a lawyer, and more importantly, as a human being. So I'm really glad to be here with her. As she mentioned, I'm a licensed professional counselor, an LPC. And I've had a small private practice for about 11 years now. We have offices in Washington and South Point. The terms counselor and therapist are really interchangeable, much like attorney and lawyer are, for all intents and purposes, interchangeable. So I'm a counselor or I'm a therapist. I was really excited to be a part of this series in conjunction with Law Day, because like so many of us, I'm really in awe of lawyers and the work that they do. I know not everyone on this session today is an attorney. I'm not either, but I know that many of you are, and I have so much respect for the law and those who have dedicated their lives to it, including my sister, who's an attorney in the state of California, and my niece, who's in law school here in Pennsylvania. Rachel and I were talking before we were presenting this, and she had told me she has a really great interest in psychology. And she had said once if she had to do it all over again, she might have maybe pursued law and perhaps psychology. And I think if I had to do it all over again, I might very well have considered a career in law. So Rachel and I might have switched places. But it's really not hyperbole to say that the law, and by extension lawyering, is in nearly every aspect of American life. From small towns to multinational corporations, one finds the rule of law right? And lawyers practicing their trade. And the American mind is fascinated by lawyers and the law. We read books about lawyers. We watch TV shows and movies about lawyers. We elect lawyers overwhelmingly to public office. 27 of our 46 US presidents have been lawyers, including the great aforementioned Mr. Lincoln. So we watch lawyers. We are entertained by fictitious accounts of what they do. We elect you, we hire you to counsel us and defend us. With that ubiquity, though, comes a responsibility. For better or worse, people look to lawyers to see how they act, what they say, or how they carry themselves. I think it's okay to say that most lawyers are accustomed to being the smartest person in the room, or at least thinking that they're the smartest person in the room. So how they communicate with those over whom they have an intellectual advantage is at least as important as how they communicate with somebody whom they respect as a true peer. Lawyers and their interaction with their colleagues and clients are a microcosm of society. Just as when I work with couples who are having arguments and can be incivil in their arguments, that's a microcosm of society. So lawyers and those admitted to the bar can be recognized for elevating or undermining human interaction. So it's an attorney's responsibility, as Rachel said, to reflect civility in their discourse if they wish for others to emulate it. I wish I could find a less trite phrase than "be the change you want to see." But unfortunately, that accurately reflects the sentiment that me and Rachel wish to impart upon you today. If you agree that today's society has a dearth of civil discourse, it's up to you and I to bring it back to the American consciousness. I dare say we all know what civil discourse is. I want to impress upon you here what it is not. It is not weakness or timidity. Being civil is not synonymous with passivity or being, buffaloed or bulldozed in a conversation. One may be passionate and yet flexible in their ideas. One can be firmly held of one's positions and yet engage in polite disagreement about them. Civil discourse is not passive or anemic. On the contrary, in my experience, it involves active listening, active restraint, the willful choice of one's words. I also want to suggest that civility is just plain pragmatic. On a basic level, it's typically in one's best interest to take the high road or be the bigger person or to be remembered kindly after a tense conversation, and not give in to the human urge to shout down or name call. One respects a gentleman or a lady. Brutes and bullies are shunned and loathed. How do we know bad music? Because we know harmonious music. How can we tell when something is roughshod or disorganized? Because we have seen choreography and preparedness. Speaking and listening with an earnest sense of civility is in our best interests if we wish to be respected and invited to have a seat at the table of our peers. In my work, I most often model and teach this concept in my capacity as a couples counselor. People who have been intimate partners have often abandoned polite conversation years ago. So I often teach couples how to listen without interrupting, how to respond rather than accuse, how to kind of lean in to what the other person's saying as opposed to kind of, put up your dukes. Just as intimate partners can be firmly held in their beliefs and wish to persuade or even to win, so too attorneys who must zealously represent their clients can at times lose sight of polite and respectful dialogue as they seek to persuade, gain an advantage, score a legal point, or to win. But it's not always just in, pardon me, in teaching couples polite conversation, or I can resonate with, or really relate to what Rachel was saying about the phone call. This wasn't recently, but a while back, I got a phone call from a client, and she said, I'd like to know if you take my insurance, and if you work with children with autism. I have a son with autism. Now, as Rachel, alluded, the attorneys have a code of ethics. Counselors have a code of ethics as well. It's the American Counseling Association, the ACA Code of Ethics. And for our code of ethics, a person becomes a client with the first phone call, right? So it's kind of the same, right? So my ethical responsibility to the client begins with that first phone call. Um, so when someone calls, if I can't help them, I have an ethical obligation, not a suggestion, to refer them elsewhere, right? It's my ethical obligation. So the particular insurance she had, we don't take. And so I started to explain that. And she said, don't give me that. You just don't want to work with people with autism, and hung up on me. Well, I've worked with people with autism for 10 years, right? So it was just kind of jarring. 2 days later, she had a distinctive voice, calls back again, and she must have been calling so many different practices that she had forgotten she'd already called me and said, I want to know if you take my insurance, and if you work with people with autism. I have a son with autism. And I said, ma'am, we don't take your insurance. And she said, don't give me that. You just don't want to work with people. And I said, ma'am, please let me finish. Let me finish. We just don't take their insurance. I would love to help your son, but we don't accept you. So if you'll listen, I will give you a list of people that you can try calling, right? So I had to kind of work through that. But my inclination was, of course, to say, okay, good luck, help yourself, right? Um, so sometimes we get these phone calls that aren't very forgiving, but we still have to mind our ethical P's and Q's. And to in that instance, I just responded with her in civil, kind of talking over me and hanging up on me 2 days earlier, by again just kind of leaning into it and letting her know I want to help her, and here's how I can help her, right? So I bring a perspective I hope to bring to this presentation, of a person who sees every day the importance of civil discourse for healing, problem solving, coexistence, and for pragmatism. I'm going to one up Rachel and go all the way back to Aristotle here, who said, a person should be as able and ready to defend themselves equally well with their speech as well as their sword, right? So there's a time for words and a time for swords, I suppose, but each interaction is governed by rules of engagement, right? So I'm going to pass this back to Rachel, and we'll talk a bit about some of the practical rules of engagement for civil discourse and respectful dialogue.
Sure. Thank you, Mike, and all very good points, for sure. One of the main takeaways that we're looking at this evening is there are problems on a level that they can seem insurmountable in terms of civility itself, and then the substantive issues on which there is incivility seen in our society these days. So, you look at the problems themselves, and then you look at the way we approach them, and it seems insurmountable at times. So one of the takeaways that we want you to have, hopefully, is that these issues are huge to tackle if we look at tackling them on a global scale. And it becomes trite when we talk about, be the change you want to see, but that really is what we're looking at. That so much of this, it has to start with self-reflection with us first, then going out to the very closest relationships that we have, and hopefully branching out to larger society. So with that in mind, we have some exercises tonight. They were put together actually by the federal courts, and we think that they tie in well to what we're talking about. So I'm going to screen share right now with you. We have our first set of exercises tonight. This is self-reflection, because again, we want to be starting with ourselves. So we're asking you to review the self-reflection questions. The numbering gets lost in translation sometimes between Kathy sending them to me and whatever my computer does with it. So they're all number one, but that's okay because that means they're all important. So we're inviting you to just take some time quietly for a few moments, read through these exercises and really try to do some introspective reflection. And then Mike and I are going to invite any comments that you might want to make, either how you're answering these personally in your own mind or different issues that they may bring to mind for you. So please go ahead and answer or speak up in the Q&A, and then we can be glad to recognize you. But just take a moment first and review these exercises on the screen. Okay, so hopefully you've had some time to read through the prompts. Is there anyone who would like to just jump up into the Q&A and volunteer any thoughts on any of these self-reflections? And by the way, I'm sure if you would like to take any of these questions and handouts with you, if you reach out to Kathy after the presentation or to me, we'll be glad to get those to you. Kathy and Mike, I'm not positive I can see the Q&A in my screen sharing. So if you see anybody popping in and you want to recognize them, go right ahead.
Yes, so far I don't think we have any.
Anybody? Okay.
Also, I can go ahead and email that to everyone right now. People like to multitask and pull it up on their email.
Okay. Well, that would be great, Kathy. Thank you. Well, maybe Mike and I will go first and break the ice, and then if anyone wants to join in, you can. I know something that I struggle with as a lawyer, and then it spills over into my personal life, is planning what I'm going to say in rebuttal instead of listening to everything that the other person is saying first. And that it's difficult because that's to some extent part of our legal training. Our training and our experience tell us that if the other side, for example, if opposing counsel is cross-examining our clients, or if they're just making their opening argument or their closing argument, we need, to do our job well and represent our client well, to some extent, we need to be listening actively and anticipating, hearing those arguments with an ear towards shutting them down automatically. Instead of just hearing out every word, we need to be almost simultaneously planning our response. That's not uncivil. That's what we need to do for our client, but there's a balance that needs to be struck in hearing the other side. And then certainly in our personal life, it becomes less useful to be planning our attack as opposed to really hearing the other person out. So I know that's one that I struggle with personally, professional hazard. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, and that's the one when I disagree with someone, I keep an open mind and momentarily put aside what I plan to say next. It's human nature. It's not just lawyerly training, but also human nature to want to defend, right? To say, all right, I'm marshaling my defense, even if I don't interrupt, but I'm not really like leaning into what you're saying. It's one of the basics, effective communication 101, teaching clients, in my perspective, is to listen to what the other person's saying, work actively to understand their point of view, and then you can say, okay, check out with them. And at the end here, Rachel and I are going to do a little exercise to show you how you can incorporate that. But it's extremely difficult because for human nature, we want to defend ourselves. And evolutionary psychologists will tell you that goes back to the earliest, cave dwelling humans. We needed that kind of fight or flight thing, right? It was built into us. So our brains are hardwired almost to want to defend ourselves. It goes against our instincts and perhaps our training to say, let me work really hard to understand the other person's point of view. To that end, to go up to two more above that, I take an active role in creating a welcoming environment for differing opinions. What a concept in 2021, right? Taking an active role in creating a welcoming environment for differing opinions. And you're going to know by the end of this, you will have no clue where Rachel and I are on any political spectrum, because this is deliberately bland, deliberately neutral, right? And so, but if you think on just, you don't even have to think of the extremes, not even on the fringes of right or left, but even most people today, we don't want to do anything to make it, let alone be an active role in creating a welcoming environment for differing opinions. So often we're going to keep silent if we have a differing opinion, or we're not going to make people feel welcome about it at all. Over the last 2 years or so, I would say, certainly before the election, leading up to the presidential election, and subsequently, and of course with COVID, whatever your thoughts are on it, I've seen families that aren't speaking to each other. Sons aren't speaking to fathers, mothers aren't speaking to daughters because of differing political opinions. That's certainly not a welcoming environment for differing opinions, and that's within families, people that are, air quotes, supposed to love each other. I think we had a comment there, Rachel.
Okay, great. Are you able to hover over the comment?
I am.
Okay.
So this is from Shelley. She wrote, when disagreeing with someone and trying to reach an agreement, try not to say, but. It's not easy. It's funny. That's a preview of coming attractions, Shelley. You're running right with us, because we're going to talk about that later, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, to say, then you'll find people cleverly do, well, instead of saying, I hear what you're saying, but they'll say, I hear what you're saying, however, right? And they'll just find a better word, or a different word than I hear what you're saying. Conversely, this is my point of view, right? Yeah, but
Well,
you're right. It's not easy. Please,
absolutely. No, go ahead. And I'm sorry, what was our commenter's name? So I can.
Shelley.
Okay, Shelley, that's interesting, because here I go with and I do have a bachelor's in psychology, by the way, so I'm not totally a charlatan at this, but pretty much one. But I've done some studying of cognitive behavioral therapy, and one of the things that's taught even to people who suffer with anxiety or with other conditions that involve very black and white thinking, OCD, that kind of thing. Therapists will try to get clients to understand the and, as opposed to the but, even within their own way of thinking. And so how helpful this is if it carries over to interpersonal communication, that, sometimes when we have really rigid ways of dealing with ourselves and with others, that's a very harsh approach to life, that is sometimes seen in people who struggle with unhelpful thinking patterns. So therapists will try to get people to understand, several things can be true. You can have the and you can live, and sometimes there's tension, to live in the and. It's much more easy to say, and I'm going to make up a political issue because we're keeping ourselves completely hidden on our persuasions here. But let's say that for some reason, the choice of the color blue as opposed to yellow, it was a heated political issue. And I could say, well, I really like Mike Peacosh, but his stance on blue is just, I can't get there, What if I were to say, I really like Mike Peacosh and we have a disagreement on blue, and there's a little bit of tension I have to live with there. And it's not always easy to reconcile that. But part of managing my own anxiety, as well as my anxiety in that relationship, I have to be able to live in the and not always jump to the but, and how helpful that can be. So thank you for the comment.
One other one, if I wanted to just draw attention, if you scroll a little bit to, I speak respectfully to people with whom I disagree. Do we have that one? There we go.
Oh, there we go.
It's number 8, or it's all the 8s. Yeah. I speak
Okay.
respectfully to people with whom I disagree, even if they disrespect me. On Mondays at 7 p.m., I run a group. It's a batterers intervention program. It's a men's nonviolence group. And I often will use some limited self-disclosure. People tend to listen to stories and anecdotes and some self-disclosure. And I'll never forget, and these men with whom I work, I have to say that generally speaking are from often enough a lower socioeconomic background. Although this is the disclaimer, of course, battering can occur in every affluent socioeconomic backgrounds and middle class and all of that. But generally speaking, the men that I've had in my group have been from a lower socioeconomic stratus. And what I'm getting at is, they could not believe when I said to them, just kind of an offhand comment once, yeah, my wife and I have never called each other names in anger. And they were like, come on, what are you talking about? Never? You don't mean that. And I said, well, no, we've never name called. We just don't do that. I have my faults, and she certainly has hers. I mean, she has a few. I've much more. We all have our faults, absolutely. Never, but name calling is not one. And they're like, you've never ever, when you were mad, you never said. But I said, no, I've never done. I've been angry. No marriage is perfect, but 11 years of marriage and then like 17 years of being together, no, we've never name called. I speak respectfully to people with whom I disagree, even if they disrespect me. When you actively practice that in your intimate relationships, such as a husband and wife relationship, then it can be kind of like easier to reflect that in others. But I'll never forget, I was actually surprised that with that group, they were incredulous that in my most intimate relationship, I had never spoken disrespectfully.
Yeah. That's an important one. And I'll go back to my example of today. This person went as far, I should have said this to illustrate the level of incivility at the beginning. This person went as far to rudely ask me where I live. And I told him I did not feel comfortable answering that question. And then he used the name of a very ritzy neighborhood where I can assure you I do not live and have driven through maybe once. And he threw it out 3 or 4 times and said, I just have a feeling that you live in blank. And finally, I told the man where I live because I had no need to tell him that, but I very politely said, sir, I can assure you this is it's an area that is a rural area / an old coal mining town. And whatever you think our goals here are, they are not to fleece you. And it is hard to be respectful when someone is disrespectful enough to get personal, but you got to find a way to do it.
Do you think we should probably move on to this next set we have here?
I think so, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay. So setting ground rules for civil discourse and difficult decisions. We can read through some of those and highlight them. Being mindful of your own behavior. Just noticing our verbal or nonverbal cues. Again, so much of this starts with us. We can't control other people. You can talk to a therapist for hours about how you can only control yourself. And I'm sure Mike has a ton to say on that subject. Being recognized by the moderator before speaking. If you're in a situation where there is a moderator, that's important. Not interrupting, it's difficult. For me, I find that difficult even when I'm not angry, when I'm excited, sometimes I'm so excited to, I find common ground with someone and I want to say exactly, exactly. And I get animated. And even though it's all well-intentioned, that can actually be a form of incivility. I'll just highlight a few others and then I'll ask Mike to do the same. Differentiating between facts and opinions. When we talk about civility tied to the rule of law, we could probably have an entire other seminar on fact versus opinion. The internet has done its fair share to almost kill the difference between fact and opinion. And one problematic phrase I hear a lot of people say, I've heard it all my life, is, well, I'm sorry, I just speak the truth. And many times what they're saying is, I speak my opinion, so that's in trying to educate ourselves, and then just be mindful if someone is giving their opinion, how can we steer that conversation back to facts? And we can say, well, I don't necessarily agree with your opinion. We may not even be able to agree on what the basic facts of this issue are, but can we try to at least find 3 facts that we agree on? Any of these that stand out to you, Mike?
Yeah. And like you, I can identify with when I'm excited. I want to interrupt, not accidentally talking over somebody, but I probably, in retrospect, realized I probably had some undiagnosed ADHD when I was a child. And my wife will say, "How are you a therapist? You're the worst listener ever." Because when I'm professionally doing it, I can be pretty good. But I'll ask her a question, and before she can answer, I'm firing another one at her, and then firing another one at her. And she's like, "Which question do you want me to answer at this point?" Right? Because I can get excited. I love the idea of finding common ground. I have 5 brothers and sisters, one of whom passed away, but so 6 of us, and we're going to have 6 different opinions on things. And some of us feel very strongly about one way or another. So what we do is we work to find common ground. I had an acquaintance at a previous job where I'm a lifelong Notre Dame fan and he's a lifelong Michigan fan, and never the two shall meet. And so we would never talk about our respective sports teams. Once we figured that out, we would talk about anything except our favorite teams. So we worked to find common ground, and it was a friendship worth having. And the last one that really, don't embarrass yourself or disrespect others by making demeaning or inappropriate comments. A lifetime ago, I had a job in an amusement park in upstate New York. Long story, but it was a different life. And I was working long hours and no excuses. And I was a much younger man. And I had a disagreement with a rides operator. And I went storming off, and I happened to bump into his boss, who was the director of operations for the entire park. And I just fumingly let him have it. And this man, was echelons higher than me in the hierarchy of the park. And he let me rage for a few minutes, and then I stopped, and he looked at me and he said, "Well, Mike, I appreciate your candor, but I'm not going to stand here and listen to you talk about my staff that way. I don't know who you think you are talking to me that way." And all the color just drained from my face. I just could not believe I had embarrassed myself and talked disrespectfully about somebody. And the contrast, we talked about meeting incivility with civility, he was cool as can be. And I apologized right away. I'm so sorry, and I sent him a little apologetic note. And to his credit, that man never mentioned that to me one time. He never said one time about the time that I lost my temper. But here it's 25 years ago, and I can still remember that I embarrassed myself by speaking in anger. And thankfully, he had the largesse to just let it go. But not everybody does, right?
That's right. I see that among attorneys. Sometimes attorneys think that it's somehow it's proving the point to the judge that, or the hearing officer or whoever it is, that we can't even let that comment go. We can't even wait until our turn to speak. If we roll our eyes or sigh or, give some body language, we're really going to get that judge's attention that was a completely boneheaded thing for the other side to say. Judges, no one is impressed by, no one is going to be more convinced to our side because we rolled our eyes or stomped our feet. We're embarrassing ourselves. We need to not do that. And again, as citizens, you need to hold us accountable. And if you have an attorney, that you've retained who's engaging in some of this behavior, some clients like that. Some lawyers think they need to put on that show for the client. I would encourage you, even as a client, that's yet another way in the areas in which you find yourself in life to advance civility. You know, don't demand that your lawyer do these kinds of boneheaded things because you think it's an advantage. You're not helping the cause of civility there if that's what you demand as a a tough attorney, because it's not helping you win, and it's bringing the cause of the rule of law down. So, well, Mike, do you want to do the role playing exercise?
Yeah.
First, do we have any comments? Does anyone want to comment on the ground rules at all? Okay. Well, let's do the role playing then, and
Sure.
we can have a little bit of discussion at the end, perhaps.
And it's up to you if you want to keep your screen share on or not, but just.
I'd like to probably go back to.
Yeah.
Oh, now I've lost my face. Okay.
Uh-oh. Well, while she's figuring that out, and I want to say I learned this technique from, there you are. I learned this technique. I was at a conference, and it was a keynote speaker who she demonstrated this. And my apologies, madam. This was about 10 years ago, and I don't remember your name, so this is not from the mind of Mike Pekosh. This is from somebody smarter and more well-trained than I am. But I'll never forget this idea that, and Rachel was kind of alluding to it in our person who made the comment. She was demonstrating effective communication and boiled it down to the difference between yes and versus yes but. Yes but communication can be thought of this way. So Rachel, let's pretend that that you and I are we're college roommates, okay? And you want to have a party, okay? So we're going to try to plan this party for the next 30 seconds, but every sentence has to begin with the phrase yes but. With the exception of the first one, you're going to say to me, I think we should throw a party. Okay, ready, go.
Hey, Mike, I think we should throw a party.
Yes, but then we're going to have all these people in the apartment tracking up the place.
Yes, but we've all been locked down. We've got our shots now. We can have a party, have some fun. Why not?
Yes, but then we have to feed everybody and supply drinks, and we're poor college students.
Yes, but you never want to have fun. You are the boring roommate.
Yes, but that's because I'm the one who has to make sure everybody's being responsible while you're just being social butterfly.
Yes, but we wouldn't have any friends if it weren't for me. So
yes, but we wouldn't have any responsible friends if it weren't. Okay, good. Nice job, right? Didn't get very far. Let's see how this works, right? So we're going to try this again. Same exercise. You and I are college roommates. You want to have a party. We're going to do the same exercise, except for this one, it's yes and. Every sentence has to begin with the phrase yes and, with the exception of the first one. You're going to say, I think we should throw a party. Ready? Go.
Hey, Mike, I think we should throw a party.
Yes, and I think we should have a theme.
Yes, and we could do Cinco de Mayo's coming up. How about that?
Yes, and so we could have like Mexican things there, and we could do like Mexican food and see maybe we can hire a band.
Yes, and I know you had some concerns about the cost and everything else, but I think we can make that work.
Yes, and we can pass the hat a little bit, or just have people bring a covered dish, or BYOB or something like that.
Yes, and would it help if I cleaned up after?
Yes, it definitely would. Yes. Okay, good. So, all right. See which party sounded like more fun, the first one or the second one? Well, obviously the second one, right? See, yes, but just shuts down communication. We've all seen that in our personal lives when somebody, and you go, I'm not going to say anything, because anything I say, you're going to have a reason why it's not going to work. But for those of you who work in professional places, we have, maybe a number of coworkers where you might throw out an idea and then people go, we can't do that because you might offend some people. Or, well, we tried that last year, it didn't work. Then suddenly you go, you know what? I'm just going to sit here. They don't want my ideas, right? So yes, and is about leaning in to hear what the other person has to say. Yes, and tell me more. Let's build on that. Where yes, but is shutting down communication. With couples that I work with, it's kind of like, they'll say, yeah, but you do this. Yes, but you do that. Yes, well, you do this. Well, pointing out the mud on my shoes doesn't make yours any cleaner, right? Pointing out the mud on my shoes doesn't make yours any cleaner. So if you say, yeah, but you do this, well, you pointed out some mud on my, okay, well, let's talk about that first. Most people don't want to talk about their muddy shoes. We want to point out the other person's. Again, I understand it's difficult to lean in, even practically perfect therapists like me. We don't always want to be pointed out where our flaws, right? So the idea is to lean in and help me understand what you're saying. Tell me more. Another quick exercise to do that. So now, Rachel, let's pretend again we're college roommates here. And what do you like better, Coke or Pepsi?
I like Coke better.
Coke. Okay. So let's pretend that we're college roommates and I was going grocery shopping and you gave me money to pick up some items for you. And I come back and I have nothing but Pepsi. Okay. So you're angry that I have nothing but Pepsi, and we're going to do this role play and watch and see what I'm doing here. Okay. Am I using yes, but or yes, and? Again, you don't have to literally say the words, right? So Rachel is angry. I just came home with Pepsi and she's going to let me know. Ready? Go.
Mike, what's up? I chipped in for this. You know, I prefer Coke and you got nothing but Pepsi.
Well, I got soda. Is that is it all the same or?
No, it's not.
Oh, is that what do you prefer?
Well, if you ever listened to me, you would understand that I prefer Coke, and you didn't even ask.
Oh, yeah, and I came back with nothing but Pepsi. I see. So what would you want me to do?
I would have wanted you to get Coke, and if you didn't remember that I like Coke, I would have wanted you to ask before you left for the store.
I see. I could have asked, or I could have texted you while I was at the store. Okay, I hear what you're saying. So in the future, if I prefer Pepsi, what do you suggest I do? Like buy a 6-pack of each, or?
That would be fine, or just ask me for enough money to cover my own Coke.
I see. Okay, I hear what you're saying. Okay, now let's pause there. Nice job, Rachel. So did you notice there, folks? I never once agreed to buy Coca-Cola. And yet Rachel was nodding and smiling and feeling like I never once agreed to do it. I was working very hard to understand what I did wrong, wrong, and what her perspective was. I never once agreed to do what she wanted me to do, but she was feeling heard, right? And I was working to understand her point. So obviously that was yes, and tell me more. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm open. That's civility. And even though she tried to draw me in a little bit, well, if you had listened, right, she did a good job on that. So now let's try this again. And same scenario, we're college roommates, and you've given me some money for groceries, and I've come home with nothing but Coca-Cola. And let's see how far we get on this one. Ready? Go.
Mike, what's up? Oh,
What do you mean?
brought only Pepsi. I like Coke.
Well, Coke sucks.
Yeah, in your opinion, not my opinion.
It's the correct opinion. Oh, do your own grocery shopping then. Pepsi is so much better.
That's ridiculous. We agreed to split the grocery shopping.
Well, and when I go, I buy the soda that I want to buy. Okay. And what's wrong with Pepsi anyway? Okay. We're not going to get very far from there, right? Am I going to convince her to like Pepsi? Of course not. She's not going to convince me to like Coca-Cola, right? So that's yes, but yeah, but do it. Just I want to shut her out of it. And those are kind of quick, silly examples, but I have couples that we try to build on that. This idea of help me understand, tell me more. So there's certain phrases you can use, such as I hear what you're saying. You probably heard, or I can say, I guess I didn't see it that way, or even you might be right. Notice I said you might be right. It's hard to say to your partner, well, you might be right. I guess I didn't see it that way. You've given me something to think about, right? So those are just some thoughts I have. Rachel, I'm going to pass it back to you. I know we're coming up to the close of our session here, but did you have any closing thoughts you wanted to share with our gang here?
I think, going back to how all of it ties to the rule of law, I thank the earlier commenter, Shelley, who brought up the but versus and, because, when we're trying to have a society where we respect a certain set of rules, and again, there's there's tension in holding opposing ideas, and it's something that people who suffer from anxiety struggle with, and it's something we suffer with on a microcosm and a macrocosm in society. It's much easier, it's less mentally taxing on our brains to not try to manage those tensions, to just say, I like him, but he supports X position. I like her, but she supports X candidate. And so black and white, there can be no right. there will be substantive issues on which we can't agree. I mean, there will be deal breakers for all of us. But if we want to move any conversation forward, you know, in maintaining a certain set of ground rules, you know, what are the basic principles? There has to be something. There has to be something that as a nation we can agree, you know, these are some foundational values that we share. How do we get the conversation at least to that point? And how do we go then from that point to where we disagree, even on the non-negotiables? How do we hear each other? And how do we make some change to maybe get, you know, to actually maybe make some movement on a non-negotiable, or at least on the few things that we are in a gray area on? We can come to some kind of agreement. You know, as silly as it may sound, look at the Coke and Pepsi examples. You know, I mean, we were pretty entrenched on our positions, but, you know, basic respect for the other person, hearing them, looking for the and instead of the but. You know, we don't have to sacrifice our rule of law. We don't have to sacrifice the things that are sacred to us to be able to hear other people and, you know, at least start that conversation and maybe move it toward a better direction. And I think looking at how we can do that in all of our own, you know, little relationships can get us far in that regard. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? We'd love to hear from you. We're talking to a screen.
And if anyone would like to speak, please post in the Q&A and then we can enable your microphone.
You can raise your hand here, right? Like, so you can do that. That was me.
That was me. Do we think it's possible? You know, do we think that civility can change the discourse at all? Do we think there are little ways we can change the world? Maybe I'm naive. I don't know. I think we can. I think we can take the little steps.
I agree.
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all attending. Oh, we've got a little comment. Thank you. You did a fantastic job. That's one of our attorneys. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much.
Kind of you, Joe.
Very,
and I would
nice.
like to thank you both. I've heard this twice now, and I know I try to follow some of your rules and conversations with family and friends. It's difficult, but with practice and conscious thought, I think it becomes easier. And you're right, it does set some ground rules for our later series where we're talking about more, you know, constitutional issues, legal issues, the Bill of Rights, First Amendment issues. Just having an understanding of how to talk to each other about these issues, I think is very important. So I'd like to thank you both very much. And any final words? Mike? Rachel?
Thank you, Rachel. Nice job as always. Kathy, thanks for your help always behind the scenes, and we appreciate you. And this was fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
Wonderful. Thank you both for participating, and we will add those of you who are attending to our list so that you will get upcoming notice of the future Rule of Law series. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Be kind.